Colt 45, 45 Colt, or even 45 Long Colt, if you will, another absolute legend of a round from the Wild West and a staple in the cartridge community. Up there with the likes of our friends the 4440 and the 4570 government, not to mention they all share pretty much the same birth year. It's crazy that three of the most iconic cartridges in American history all came out in such quick succession. From movies and TV shows to cowboy action shooting and collecting, everyone knows the Colt 45. Everyone knows the name when they hear it. There's even been songs about it. Everyone knows of the Colt 45, whether they like it or not. Howdy do, folks, and welcome back to Chambered in History. We're going over the story of cartridges that made history themselves. From back of the drawer relics to big bore bruisers, we're cracking open the brass cases and spilling out the history. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We are trying to reach 2,000 followers still. We're at 1650 now, I think. So y'all keep it up and we'll get there soon. Thank you. As mentioned in the intro, today we are covering the 45 Colt, an American frontier icon that helped shape the West, or really the country itself. We will be going over who and when it was made, reasons it was made for, wars it saw use in, firearms it was chambered in, ballistics, dimensions, and movies that featured it. Pretty much the same type of stuff we usually go over here on the channel. So if you're here to learn, stay tuned because we have a good bit to cover. So 1873 was a big year for cartridge development, as it seemingly gave us three of the most iconic and trailblazing rounds in our country's history. The 4570 government, the 4440 Winchester, and our round of the day, the 45 Colt. The Civil War created quite the demand for new developments in firearms technology. While yes, the war itself created the demand for such feats, it wasn't until the period thereafter where things truly began to unfold, as manufacturing was at an all-time high and companies were racing to create one next big thing after the other. Now, the true origins of the Colt 45 started with the model 1860. As Colt was seeing just how popular the new centerfire designs were becoming, they decided to come out with one of their own. Between the Colt engineer Charles B. Richards and former Remington gunsmith William Mason, they came up with the Bennett Prime 44 Colt in 1871, and then began implementing their new Richard Mason conversion kits on the old model 1860s to fire the new centerfire cartridges. This conversion, however, was merely a band-aid as they were retooling and restructuring their factories to produce the new 1871-72 top-open revolvers chambered in 44 Henry. I know we kind of skipped over the 44 Colt, I didn't mean to, but we're going to cover it a little bit here as it was pretty short-lived. Anyway, the 44 Colt was fairly low on the power scale, especially comparatively to what came next. It was running a 225 grain bullet with about 23 grains of FFG black powder, producing only 604 feet per second and about 207 foot-pounds of energy. So definitely no Screaming Eagle nor sledgehammer of a round. But the 44 Henry, on the other hand, was a little bit more powerful, slinging a 200 grain bullet at about 1,125 feet per second, producing about 570 foot-pounds of energy. Now, these numbers are mostly rifle numbers, I'm pretty sure, as far as I could find, but it was still definitely an upgrade. The only problem was now you were dealing with a rimfire cartridge, which obviously has its downsides. And while yes, the Army did purchase several thousand of these revolvers in the short time it was being produced, it showed them exactly what they did and didn't want in a revolver. They wanted a more powerful cartridge for obvious reasons, they wanted a solid frame to make it a little bit more durable, and they no longer wanted a outside lube bullet as it attracted too much grit and sand. Something that you would think people would have already learned by now, but whatever. So Richard and Mason got to work alongside the engineers at Union Metal Cartridge Company to come up with something that would fulfill the request of the Army. And finally, they came up with the 45 Colt and the Colt Single Action Army in tandem with each other. This wasn't like a chicken and the egg kind of thing. They were created together. One was created for the other and vice versa. The 45 Colt retaining a feature or two of its older 44 caliber brother, but we'll save that for later as we do have an order of things around here, so hold your horses. Now, as mentioned, the 45 Colt saw its fair share of wars and battles, but which were the most important, or should I say most noteworthy of our discussion today? Well, that's what I'm here for, so hold on to your britches and strap in because we got some crazy stuff to go over. Specifically, one of them in particular is very crazy, but we're going to save that one for last because if I told you the crazy one first, then the rest of them would just either seem sad or lame. So you save the crazy stuff for the end. Best for last. You got me. Well, we find ourselves back at the Battle of Little Bighorn because all these rounds were so piled up on top of each other. So we're going to have to go over it again. But with that aside, considering the U.S. Army had already adopted the 45 and its single action army dispenser, obviously it was present at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Now, since I've already gone over this whole thing in our 4570 episode, and I'm pretty sure our 4440 episode, maybe, probably lying about that. I'm not going to go through the entire thing again. We're just going to do a quick rundown. So here we go. The government found gold on the land that the natives were living in and went back on the previous agreements, kicking them off with a deadline. Many tribes purposely missed the deadline, leading the government to deploy forces to go dispatch the now fugitive tribes. However, when General Custer's unit arrived, they realized that they were severely outnumbered, but instead of waiting for reinforcements, decided to try to strategize their way around it and make up for their lack of numbers. However, this plan failed, and the natives won the battle swiftly, leading to the most decisive U.S. military defeat in our history. And that's the Battle of Little Bighorn, again. And then we have a significantly sadder story, the Wounded Knee Massacre. Wounded Knee started with something called the Ghost Dance. Based on a vision seen by a Sioux religious leader, this was a ritual performed by the Sioux that was said to bring about the Messiah of their culture, who was said to stop the white man's conquest, bring back the dead, and restore the natives' old way of life. Many people who believed the Sioux to be savages were terrified at the idea that they would have such power. Arriving at the Pine Ridge Res in October of 1890, Daniel Royer saw the ghost dance and thought it to be a war dance. After which he requested that troops be sent out from President Harrison just a month after his arrival. He was quoted saying, "The Indians are dancing in the snow and are wild and crazy. We need protection and we need it now." President Harrison took Mr. Royer's request very seriously and immediately sent out the 7th Cavalry to arrest several Sioux leaders, including that of Sitting Bull, not only one of the shot callers from the Battle of Little Bighorn, but also Annie Oakley's friend from our 4440 episode. Leading the cavalry was Commander James Forsyth. I don't know how to say that. I'm just going to say Forth. It's right here. I should have looked into that. Sorry. I know I'm bad about not looking into things that I can't pronounce, but I wasn't thinking about it at the time. I'm going to say Forth. That'll be it. And in December of that year, Forth and his troops tried to arrest Sitting Bull for not stopping the ghost dance. Though tragically, in all the commotion, Sitting Bull was shot and killed. After hearing of Sitting Bull's death, the surrounding Lakotas fled the area immediately, while Bigfoot, not the tall hairy one, continued performing the ghost dance. However, Bigfoot caught pneumonia just 5 days later, and he and his tribe were captured peacefully by the 7th Cavalry at Wounded Knee. After being captured, the soldiers began confiscating the rifles, which was going just fine, really, until a few Sioux men started performing the ghost dance, which started making the soldiers nervous. Meanwhile, deaf Sioux member Black Coyote refused to give up his rifle as he just got it and likely didn't know why it was being taken from him, as he was deaf. Him and a soldier fought over the rifle until it unfortunately discharged, leading Custer's rebuilt cavalry to open fire on the now unarmed natives, mowing them down with rifles, revolvers, and even Gatling guns, laying waste to them all, even the women and children who were running out of fear but were gunned down anyway. At least 300 Lakota were brutally murdered by the time it was all said and done, at least half of them being women and children. About a week later, a burial party was sent out which proceeded to bury about 146 natives in a mass gravesite. Only about 25 of the cavalrymen lost their lives during this massacre. And while yes, this did lead to the end of the Indian Wars as they had squashed out the resistance, it wasn't all just sunshine and rainbows, obviously, especially for 4th Commanding Officer General Miles, who called the event a criminal military blunder and a horrible massacre of women and children. I mean, he's not wrong. But perhaps even more unfortunately, not more unfortunately than the event actually happening. Not that, like, more unfortunately of things. Anyway, the current president was up for re-election, and to avoid bad publicity, he ignored General Miles' report and instead stating that the soldiers were heroes for dismantling these savages as they were referred to. And in 1891, 20 of these soldiers who committed these atrocities were given medals of honor for their bravery. Pretty gross if you ask me. Now, many believe that considering this was Custer's rebuilt cavalry, that a lot of the men were just out for revenge against the people who destroyed the members of it before. But there's really no way of knowing, though I think that's probably true. That's more than likely true. Unfortunate survivor Black Elk recalled the event in 1931, saying he remembers it like it was yesterday. I say unfortunate survivor because I don't think I would want to survive something like that. I mean, imagine living the rest of your life having to remember that every day. That is beyond traumatizing. Traumatizing doesn't even begin to cover what that is. I mean, that is just a horrific scene. You're going to see that in your nightmares. Screw that. I'd rather go with them. That's fine. Not going to sit there and remember that forever. Can't do it. Okay, on to the crazy one I was talking about. A less depressing but equally horrifying event, just kind of in a different way. And that is the U.S. takeover of the Philippines after the Spanish-American War of 1898, during which Spain gave their land holdings of the Philippines to the U.S. But our story specifically takes place in the southern Philippines, where the Moros, Spanish for Muslims, had resided for over 400 years and had a reputation for resisting colonization from the likes of their own government, the Filipino government, the Spanish, and now the U.S. They were fierce warriors of insane bravery and led a resistance against the American takeover until 1913. Among their people were sewer slide warriors. I know I hate using that word, but YouTube doesn't like the real word for some reason, known as juramantado. Who could use they were known for being completely unstoppable, had no fear, and would use any weapon they could to decimate anyone who stood in their way. They were also known for being completely resistant to the standard issue 38 caliber long Colt being used at the time. See, the 38 long Colt was the round of choice to be paired with the Colt double action army adopted in 1892. It used a 150 grain bullet, producing about 700 feet per second and a measly 157 foot-pounds of energy. That's almost 3 times lower than our cartridge of the day, the 45 Colt. This resilience to the 38 Colt was widely due to not only the warriors' little care for death on the front lines, but also due to the fact that the juramantado would actually pre-tourniquet themselves before battles, tying bands around their wrists, their elbows, their shoulders, their waist, their knees, their ankles, all to prevent significant blood loss in the heat of battle, allowing them to sustain serious damage without going down. They were known for being completely fearless and having absolutely no regard for their own life, seeing death as a mere obstacle in the heat of battle. Pretty much anybody who had the unfortunate duty of facing them was terrified of them. Many soldiers recounted the warriors taking several shots from both their pistols and their rifles, with it doing seemingly nothing to stop them or slow them down. There was even a juramantado prisoner who escaped, taking 4 shots from a 38 Colt, 3 of which hit him in the lungs, and you might be thinking, oh, that 4th shot, that's what took him down. Nope, you're wrong. What finally took him down was someone hitting him over the head with the buttstock of a rifle. This problem led commanders to practically beg the U.S. Army to either send them the old decommissioned single-action armies or find some way to get them pistols chambered in 45 Colt to do the job. This actually was what led to the development of the Colt Model 1909, which is basically a double-action army that was just rechambered in 45 Colt and made to shoot them. See, I told you this one would be nuts, all right? That's why I saved it for last. Not last, but it's the last war story. Anyway, going on. So obviously, we've already established that the 45 Colt was first chambered in and even created in tandem with the Colt Single Action Army. So we're going to go ahead and move on to a couple different firearms that are chambered in 45 Colt. So along with the Single Action Army, we had its successors like the Colt New Service Revolver, otherwise known as the Colt Model 1909. See, the New Service Revolver was the first iteration of the Colt Model 1909. It was Colt's answer to the failure of the 38 Long Colt, which, as mentioned previously, lacked stopping power for pretty much anyone who needed it, including hunters, lawmen, soldiers, whoever it was. Unless you were shooting a rabbit, you needed more than a 38 Long Colt. It went through many changes, including the Colt Positive Lock, which was just a metal bar that went through the between the hammer and the frame, which prevented unwanted discharges, so a safety. By 1909, the revolver was adopted during World War I, as Colt was having trouble producing enough 1911s for the war effort. The pistol also featured a swing-out cylinder and a star-shaped extractor, which allowed the soldier to push out all the rounds at once with the push of a button or shove of a rod or whatever you want to call it. They could take out all the rounds at once was the point, spent cases. However, this did lead to the 45 Colt receiving a larger rim to help the extractor actually do its job, as before it had a very small rim and made it really hard for anything to really catch on it. That's why there really weren't any rifles made in 45 Colt for a long time. Colt also produced some target variants of the New Service Revolver from 1900 to 1940, featuring adjustable front and rear sights, as well as checkering on the back strap And then between 1932 and 1940, Colt produced some special edition models known as the Shooting Masters. These were target variants of the highest quality and display the absolute best in Colt's gunsmithing capabilities. True works of art in the revolver world, especially back then. Now, like I just mentioned, rifles didn't get chambered in .45 Colt for quite a long time, but you might be even more surprised to find out that didn't happen until 1985 with Winchester's Model 1894. This was pretty much only due to the fact that like I mentioned before, the .45 Colt had a really small rim, and it made it very hard for the lever action's extractor to grab the case and pull it out, which would lead to jams, and you don't want your gun jamming. So if you can't make a gun without it jamming, don't make it. This problem was solved with the enlargement of the rims on the .45 Colt in later designs, allowing rifles to chamber them properly, or cycle them properly. The Winchester 94 was chambered in many calibers, including the revolver calibers like the .45 Colt, as well as the longer rifle calibers like the .30-30 Winchester. The revolver chamberings are most popular among like cowboy action shooters for their low recoil and high ammo capacity, while the rifle calibers are more popular among hunters who really need the stopping power to take down whatever they're shooting. We also have one more pistol that I would like to mention from our current time in history that you probably know of, and that is the Taurus Judge self-defense revolver. Now, while the Judge is chambered in .410, hence the extremely long cylinder on it, you can run .45 Colt. And while yes, it is devastatingly effective at close ranges using the rounds it was made for, you can extend that range very slightly by using .45 Colt. Now, I do say slightly because these little hand cannons actually feature a smooth bore, which kills accuracy when you're using the .45 Colt, which kind of defeats the point. Because if you didn't know, rifling is what made things accurate. When we came out with rifling, that's when things really started to hone in there. If you don't have rifling, it's not going to shoot straight or good. Personally, if I had one, I think I would run, I think they're a 5-shot, so I think I'd run 2 .410 and 3 .45 Colt. I think that would give you the best range of options. I mean, if you're using .410 in a handgun, you shouldn't need more than 2. I mean, how often are you really going to attack by more than like a person or 2, you know? But then again, I would prefer to use just about anything else in a self-defense situation, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. And now we arrive at our flick features for the .45 Colt. As with our previous episode on the 4440, there is a lot of movies that feature Colt single action armies that are usually in .45 Colt. But once again, this is a cartridge channel, not a movie channel, so we will only be covering a few. Starting with, believe it or not, another film that was named directly after something we're talking about today, Colt 45, a 1950 film starring Randolph Scott, Ruth Roman, and Zachary Scott. The film was actually the inspiration for the widely known TV show Colt 45, and follows a gun salesman by the name of Steve Farrell, or Farrell, tracking down a stone-cold killer who stole 2 Colt 45s and leaves a string of death in his wake. So yeah, another movie named directly after the gun it's filmed around, where the antagonist steals the gun and the protagonist gives chase and tracks him down to get the gun back. That's like the 3rd time we've had that happen. I think Springfield Rifle was that way. Winchester 73, I think. And what was the other one? There was another one. I know there was another one, but oh, it's probably this one. I said 3, right? Anyway, I guess they were running low on movie ideas in the 1950s. Now, the guns actually used in the movie that were stolen were .44 Colt Dragoons, so not Colt 45s at all. But in a continuity error, you actually see 2 Colt single-action armies during one scene where there's a tussle and one of Harris's deputies pulls it out of the other guy's holster. So you do see one. So we're only doing 2 movies today, but our second and final one is worth 100. It is, in my opinion, the greatest Western movie of all time. That's right, folks. Today we are covering Tombstone. This 1993 classic stars Kurt Russell, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, and Val Kilmer as our main 4 heroes, as well as many, many other very prolific actors and actresses. Now, I'm sure I don't need to explain this movie to most of you. You've probably seen it a dozen or 2 times, but we probably have a viewer or 2 who haven't seen the movie and haven't completed this very important step in every human being's life of watching Tombstone. So this is for them. Here we go. Basically, Wyatt Earp and his brothers are trying to get out of their gunslinging days that they've been living, but are obviously pulled right back in whenever a very dangerous group of cowboys, or gang of cowboys, pulls them back in as they try to restore order to the area. In the film, Wyatt Earp's main sidearm is his absolutely beautiful Colt Peacemaker with custom personal engravings as well as a extra long 12-inch barrel. Now, other than that, pretty much every character in this movie who uses a revolver, except for a few, are using Colt single action armies. Like, a lot of Colt single action armies are in this movie. I mean, there was a couple Smith & Wessons, there was a Remington, and a few others, but it was mostly single action armies. I know that was a pretty short summary for such an amazing movie. I just talked it all up and then I just gave you that. But please just go watch it. It is worth it. I promise. Go watch it. It will change your life. What kind of ballistics was this round cranking out, you may ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. The original loading for the .45 Colt took a little bit of figuring out to do, as they were experimenting with 225 to 255 grain bullets and 28 to 40 grains of black powder to decide which was best. And they wound up settling on the 255 grain bullet and the full 40 grains of black powder, producing a whopping 800 feet per second and 400 foot-pounds of energy. Because I guess if you're going, you might as well go big. Although in the modern day, as usual, we have a huge number of options compared to what they had in the late 18th century. Midway USA alone has, I think, 68 different options to choose from between brands and load types. I know it's weird that I always use Midway USA, but they have like a lot of inventory, so it's a pretty good guesstimate on how many are really available, because they usually have almost everything. I say almost. They have a lot to choose from, so I usually just kind of go off of them based on what the average person can get their hands on. We have the option of the extremely hot loads from the likes of Grizzly and Buffalo Boar, who are achieving over 1,500 feet per second and over 1,100 foot-pounds of energy using 220 to 250 grain bullets, and then also their dangerous game defense loads or large game loads using 300 to 400 grain bullets, still achieving 11 to 1,200 feet per second and still producing over 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. And then we have our cowboy action loads, which is pretty much what everyone else makes. Winchester, Hornady, HSM, Federal, all of them. And that is mostly because, from what I can tell, really the main reason people are still using a .45 Colt is for cowboy action events. So they want the low recoil, low speed rounds that are producing 650 to 800 feet per second, because it's not all about power to them, they're just banging steel. So they want something that's low recoil. Also, the cowboy action loads tend to be a little more readily available because, like I said, from what I can tell, that's mostly the reason people are still using this round. So now that we know what kind of speeds and wallop this old girl is putting out, it's time to learn about the dimensions. Starting from the top, we have a bullet diameter of 0.451 to 0.458 inches, similar to its .44 caliber older brother, and a neck diameter of 0.480 inches. And since this is a true straight wall cartridge, we also have a base diameter of 0.480 inches. Then we have a rim diameter of 0.512 inches, a case length of 1.28 inches, and an overall length of 1.6 inches. Anyway, folks, that's about it for today. I hope y'all enjoyed this dive into yet another absolutely legendary cartridge from the Wild West, and one that's here to stay. So whether you're out stalking the woods for dinner, settling a heated disagreement with a bear, or just trying to kick your fellow cowboy action competitor's butt, the .45 Colt is up for the challenge. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that like button to stay up to date on all of our cartridge adventures and everything in between. So until then, keep your powder dry, your brass polished, and always stay chambered in history. Thank you.